You're listening to The Naturally Noel Show, brought to you by Noel's Naturals, all natural products that really work. And now, please welcome entrepreneur, wife, homeschooling mom of four, and founder of the Noel's Naturals brand of products, your host, Noel Talley.
Well, hey friends, welcome back. I took a couple weeks off after my last episode because, ironically enough, I got sick again, which is really just, if you go back and listen to that episode, is really just very frustrating. But I am still working through my program of just detoxing and, trying to get back on track with my health. And one of the things I wanted to talk about this week that just kind of came up in my life was just kind of slowing down. It happened because of my son, my 9-year-old. So 2 days a week, my kids go to a homeschool co-op. And so on those mornings, we have to get up early and get out the door and, get lunches made and backpacks ready and all of those things. And, not even just on those days, but any day when I'm rushing the kids out the door, whether it's, to get to an event or to go to church, I get very agitated. I'm kind of like yelling and pushing everybody along, and it's just like this frenzy. And it was so funny. He asked me the other day, he said, "Mom, why do you always yell at us? And why are you so mad whenever we leave the house?" And it really just kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, gosh, why am I always so agitated when we leave the house? And so it caused me to really look at myself and ask myself some hard questions. And so one of the things, I kind of explained to him is that being not just on time, but being early is really important to me. And he asked why, as, this kid is so inquisitive and so context is so incredibly important to him, which I love so much because it's really important to me. He's a lot like me in that way, always asking why and always wanting to know more and wanting to go deeper beneath the surface and not just take things at face value, which is just such an amazing quality. But it pushes me. It pushes me to think more into, he will not just take a basic answer. I always have to really explain things for him. So, I explained to him, my dad was military, and, if you're on time, you're late. And if you're, 15 minutes early, you're on time. And, he really took that very seriously. I mean, almost to a fault. My dad, we joke that he would show up to parties an hour early and, nobody's set up yet. And people are like, "What are you doing here?" But that's my dad, always wants to be early. Really early. And so, I probably don't take it quite to that extreme, but, being 15 minutes early to pretty much everything is very important to me and my husband too. It's something we actually talk about with young couples. When you talk about compatibility, we ask, like, are you compatible with your timing? Because if one partner is always late and the other person really likes to be punctual, that can actually be a big point of contention among couples. So we always just ask, where do you fall, in terms of being, on time? And, is that a value that's important to you and that will cause, issues later down the road? But thankfully, my husband and I are both equally value being on time, being early. But one of the things he said, my son mentioned, he's like, "We're actually not even running late. We're running late for like the arbitrary timeline that you set to be early. So even if we left a few minutes later, we'd still be, 5 minutes early. We just wouldn't be as early as you want to be." And I was like, what? That's actually a really fair point, that I get upset because we're not going to be early enough. And so, yeah, I really kind of just looked back at my upbringing and my parents, particularly my dad, that was something, it was always just like, let's move, hurry. And I personally, as a kid, I was the dawdler. I was the person that, it took me 15 minutes to get my shoes on, and, we'd be getting ready to leave, and I suddenly had a project that I wanted to start. And so my parents were constantly having to push me along and kind of drag me out of the house. So I do understand from the perspective of a parent how tough that is when you have a kid that's kind of your slowpoke. The kind of dragging them along, and that can get frustrating. But I do remember as a kid constantly being told, hurry, 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 hurry up, you're taking too long, hurry up, let's go, we gotta go. And so that was really instilled in me, that anxiety of, oh, I have to hurry. And so I'm always hurrying kind of all the time. And so to slow down is tough for me. And so it's funny, I'm going to throw my dad under the bus a little bit here, but I don't think he'll mind. If you go back and listen to my podcast with him, you'll meet my dad and see what a cool guy he is. But one of the things, I brought this to my dad's attention. I talked to him about it because this week I saw on an Instagram page, I believe it was Dr. Jabin Moore, who has a lot of really great content. But he was talking about signs that you might be chronically addicted to stress. And it was really interesting because it really sounded like it described my dad quite a bit. And, it talked a lot about, are you always rushing? Are you always feeling like you're in a hurry or feeling like you're late, even when there's not really a need for it? Do you feel like you have to, leave places early because you got to get to something else, and do you have a hard time sitting still? Do you have a hard time, just resting when there are no projects going? And so I sent it to my dad, and I'm like, hey, you think this sounds like anybody? Which he vehemently denied. But, we talked about it, and my dad kind of stood by his position. And I think it's an interesting position, and I think it's worth talking about. He talked about how, he came from a childhood where he didn't have the luxury of rest, and he didn't have the luxury of slowing down. When you grow up not having much, and when you grow up in a different generation where, if you didn't work hard, if you didn't, get yourself up and moving, you weren't going to have any opportunities and successes in your life. And, he grew up in, kind of in an industrial factory area where, they weren't handing out opportunities to young guys like him. And so, because of that, he grew up with this value of, you gotta move, you gotta go, you can't sit idly by. And that's something that I feel like has really helped me in my life in a lot of ways, because I am a hustler. I am a go-getter. I am the kind of person that I don't like to sit still. My husband is the same way. We always want to have a project going, and people often ask me like, oh gosh, how do you do so much? And I always say, I do what I want to do. And what I want to do is a lot. And so I don't feel particularly stressed out by the amount of things that I do, because, I enjoy, I would not say I enjoy being busy. I do not enjoy being busy. I don't like idleness and busyness just to be busy. But I do really enjoy being a part of meaningful projects that fulfill me. And so there's a very big difference there. And that's something that I feel like that value was instilled in me. What I don't know that I adequately learned, and what I'm now having to kind of relearn, is when to stop and when to have that boundary, and where the balance is between hustle and busy. And so here are some of the things that I personally have been very, very guarded over regarding busyness, especially with my kids. We don't do activities that I don't personally think will have genuine, long-term value to our lives. That includes a lot of sports and things like that. I'm not saying that there isn't some value in sports, There certainly is. There's team building skills, there's problem solving, there's, moving your body. There's a lot of value, but the cost of being out at a ball field several nights a week and taking away from our family time, or, having to spend Sundays doing sports, that take away from our day of rest and our day to kind of recoup as a family. I'm just not interested in that. For our family, that's not a good fit. Other things like, play dates or, kids events, those are good things. We're invited to a lot of really fun things, which I'm sure my kids would like. And we do some, but we don't do a ton. And I know some people like to do all those things. Like they go to every single, bounce house and every kid's birthday party and every, there's a farmer's market and there's you go pumpkin picking and you can go blueberry picking and there's all these different opportunities, and I'm sure they're fun, and I'm sure a lot of them are really rewarding, and there's a lot of memory making. But I also very fiercely guard our time because I don't want to feel exhausted at the end of the day. We've spent all morning and afternoon at this event, and then we get home, and then we have to do homeschool, and then we have to, get dinner, and then quickly get to a practice, and, that to me, I'm not interested in that. So that is something that I do a lot. However, going back to my original point with the getting out of the house and the rushing and the being mad. So I really, did some personal introspection there and realized, okay, maybe I've got some things from my childhood and being hurried along that I'm bringing in. And so I decided to stop. I just said, you know what, I prayed through it, and I was just like, is this an area in my life where I need improvement? And so I decided to just kind of take some deep breaths and calm myself down and remove that chaos that I was bringing into the situation. And, it has been a much easier time getting out the door without me yelling at everybody. Kirk Martin, who we did a podcast with earlier this season, he talks about this little exercise that he does. And he says on average it takes, I think he says like 35 to 40 seconds or something to complete. That if you're trying to leave somewhere and your kid is fixated on something, they're trying to finish, an activity, or they want to, oh mom, look at this thing, and normally your gut reaction would be, we don't have time for that. Like, put that down, we gotta go. And then they get upset, and then there's a meltdown, and then you gotta drag them. And he said, instead, engage the child and say, okay, what is it you want to show me? And they say, okay, here's the thing. And they show you, and then you say, oh, that is so cool. Hey, you know what? I'd really love to learn more about this from you, but right now we gotta go. And so I promise we're gonna look at this when we get back, and I really want you to talk to me more about that when we get back. And then they're like, okay, cool. And then you go. And taking that time to engage with your child, you get out the door more quickly than you would have if you had kind of argued. So that's one little fix. It's not always going to go that way. Sometimes, they may still have a meltdown, but I like that. I like that idea. However, just generally me changing my attitude. And that's something really I've been learning a lot just in the last year or two, how much of parenting is less about me controlling and fixing my kids and their behavior, and a lot more of me controlling myself and my behavior. And through that, I'm modeling self-regulation, and I'm modeling how to correct and improve to my kids. And so I did go back to my son about a week later, and I said, hey, I really took what you said to heart, and I'm working on it. Have you noticed? And he's like, yeah, I have noticed. And I told him, I said, thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. That's something I didn't realize I was doing, and you're helping me be better. And I explained to him, as a kid, I kind of had this idea that my parents were perfect. or that like, adults didn't struggle, or that adults were kind of like fully formed and finished and complete and were no longer on a journey. And so I kind of had this improper view of what I would be like as an adult. I thought, okay, I'm going to, turn 18 or 21 or whatever it is, and I'll be an adult and I'll be done. And then I won't have to struggle with things anymore. And so as I, probably not in my young adulthood did I think of these things, but as I became a parent and I, really met a challenge that I, could not easily overcome. Most of the things that I had dealt with before parenting, I tackle struggles and I overcome them and I move forward, and I'm kind of that kind of person. I'm a problem solver, and I'm usually able to fix things and move through them easily. But parenthood has been hard, much harder than I expected, as I'm sure so many of you can relate to. And so when I hit that obstacle and I wasn't easily able to overcome it, I thought, well, wait a second. I thought when you become a parent and when you're an adult that you are done and that you're fixed. And so it took me some time to give myself that grace and realize, okay, that's actually not reality. It's always a work in progress, and you're always growing and learning. And so what I have chosen to do with my son, and we'll see how candid I am with my other kids in these conversations. He's a different kid. He's very mature and very deep, and he can handle these sorts of conversations. I may approach this differently with my other children, but particularly with him, I'm very honest with him about how I'm still a work in progress, because I want him to know that he will always be a work in progress, and that that's okay and it's healthy, and that it's good to always be working on yourself and to be learning from other people and to be willing to change. And so I feel like this was such a huge learning opportunity for him to see, one, that I value his opinion, I hear him, I listen to him, that I am willing to admit when I'm wrong, and that I'm willing to make changes and be better moving forward. And so, this has really just brought to my attention just a lot of work that I need to do in the area of living slowly and balancing that with also being a hustler and also being, a very proactive and project-minded person, because that is who I am. That's good and valuable, and I want to be that way. I enjoy being that way. But am I ending up in a place where I am going back to maybe an addiction to stress hormones? I talked to my husband about that because he really related to that, to just the addiction to stress hormones. And I've seen a lot of interesting posts about that lately, about when you grow up in a state of stress, which I did not grow up under an immense amount of stress. I had a pretty easy childhood, but there was just that sense of rush there. But when you have that feeling at a young age, you become used to it, and you kind of go back to those familiar feelings and those familiar chemicals in your body. And by chemicals, I mean, hormones and, stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. That feels normal and familiar. And when you're not experiencing that, you maybe don't know what to do with yourself. And so I like to think that I've progressed from that sort of mindset some. But there's definitely so much more work to do in that area of slowing down. But it's something that, I've really been intentional about. It's why we moved out to our farm. It's why we, really said no to the busy life of the city. And, we made some extreme changes to make that happen. However, just moving to the farm is not in and of itself enough to really, change those neural pathways that I have worn so well. There's some interesting science about neural pathways and how it's like a bicycle path. a well-worn bicycle path that you've gone down 100 times, and you're riding your bike, and so your bike just is naturally going to find its wheels into that path. And so if you decide to take your wheels just outside of that path, and your wheel turns just a little bit, it's gonna find itself right back into that well-worn path. The wheel's just kind of gonna move into that pathway because it's rougher on the outside, and it's gonna go where it's smoother. Your wheels will just find their way down that smooth path. And that's kind of how these neural pathways are in our brain. And so it really takes a lot of work, a lot of mental work, and just emotional work and spiritual work to reroute those neural pathways, because you have to go through rough terrain to kind of wear down a new path. And so that takes work. It takes effort, and we're working on that for sure out here. But I just wanted to encourage you, if you are finding yourself feeling busy, if you're finding yourself rushing when you don't need to rush, slow down and really just ask yourself the question, what's going to happen that's so bad? I personally find it to be a character flaw when people are chronically late. That's just my judgmental heart. I'll just be honest. So I'm not saying, be late to everything, but I'm saying, what's the worst case scenario? If is it worth yelling at your kids? Is it worth, adding that additional chaos and stress to your mornings to get everybody out the door? Or can you retrain your brain? Can you have that conversation with yourself and really ask, okay, can we find some different ways to solve this problem? Are there some better planning things that you can do to make things go more smoothly? Can we make sure the night before that everyone's shoes are by the door? I feel like that is like a huge problem in our house. We go to leave the house and nobody can find a shoe. I don't know where they all go, but maybe that's something the night before. Hey, everyone, let's make sure we all have our shoes by the door. Making sure lunches are made ahead of time, doing some prep work ahead can certainly make things go more smoothly. But here's the thing, is that learning to control yourself, even when things aren't going smoothly, that is a muscle that has to be worked out, and you have to have the discipline to control yourself and to take those deep breaths and slow down. And so I love so much. I think my son listens to my words. He listens to what I preach. And he is quick to call me on it when my actions do not line up with the things that I've been preaching. And so I for one, am thankful for that. I'm thankful that I have these little accountability partners to remind me of what I say I believe and what I say I hold to, and to really to help me grow and be better. So my homework for you today is to slow down in whatever ways you can. Take a deep breath and just really try to enjoy your kids, enjoy your family, enjoy your day, and don't try to rush through and get from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Slow down, be in the present, and just, relax. Relax if you can. It really will make things so much better. And I'm trying. I have some feelers out for a couple guests. I have admittedly sort of laxed on my responsibility of planning ahead for this podcast. So yeah, that's part of the reason why I took a couple weeks off, but also just to get well again and to feel good. So I'm feeling much better now, and we are full speed ahead on Vibrant Health and getting back to where I want to be. But I really want to have, again, I'm not going to say who yet, but I'm trying to get a guest on to come and talk to us more about stress and how it really affects the body physiologically and affects our brain, because I feel like that's a huge part of this conversation. So stay tuned. Make sure you're following us on social media for updates on new episodes. But I hope you're having a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Naturally Noelle Show, empowering you to live a more natural life, one step at a time.